The concert hall was quiet in the early morning, the kind of silence that felt soft and gentle, as if it was waiting for something special to happen. Sunlight came in through the tall windows, touching the polished wooden floor and casting long bright lines toward the grand piano on stage. The piano looked almost proud sitting there, shining under the warm light. It was the kind of instrument people respected even before hearing a single note. The pianist had arrived earlier than usual that day. She liked the calm of the empty hall. It gave her space to breathe, to think, and to feel the music before anyone else filled the room. She placed her bag on a nearby chair, opened the lid of the piano, and sat down gently. Her fingers rested on the keys for a moment, and then she began to play. Soft notes floated like warm air, spreading to every corner of the hall. The music was slow and thoughtful at first, then grew deeper as she lost herself in the sound. For a while, she believed she was completely alone, but she didn't know that near the back of the hall, a small boy was quietly walking in with his mother. His mother worked part-time at the concert hall, cleaning and arranging things before events. She usually tried her best to keep her son close by so he wouldn't disturb anyone, but today, he was more curious than usual. The boy's eyes widened the moment he heard the piano. It wasn't the first time he heard someone play, but this time felt different. The notes seemed to call him forward. He held his mother's hand at first, but slowly, step by step, he slipped his hand free and wandered toward the sound. His mother whispered his name softly, trying not to interrupt the pianist, but the boy didn't turn back. Something about the music pulled him like a gentle magnet. He tiptoed across the wide space, his small shoes almost silent on the polished floor. The pianist was now practicing a more complex part, her hands moving quick and light, her face calm but focused. She didn't notice the boy until he was standing several feet away from the stage, staring up at her with round, shining eyes. She lifted her hands from the piano, letting the last note linger. When she looked down and saw him, she blinked in surprise. Children didn't normally wander into rehearsal time, especially not one so young. "Hello there," she said softly, not wanting to frighten him. The boy didn't answer right away. His eyes shifted from her to the piano, as if the instrument mattered more to him than words. His mother arrived seconds later, slightly out of breath. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "He didn't mean to disturb you. He gets curious sometimes." The pianist shook her head with a small smile. "It's all right. He's not bothering me." She looked at him again. "Do you like the piano?" The boy nodded, but only just a little, as if he wasn't sure if he should show too much excitement. "What's your name?" she asked. He whispered it shyly, almost too quietly to hear. "Well," she said gently, "it's nice to meet you." The boy's mother touched his shoulder. "Come on now, let's go. She has work to do." But before she could lead him away, the boy raised his hand slightly, pointing to the piano. Can I play for a moment?" he asked in a small, hopeful voice. His mother froze for a second, clearly unsure of what to say. She looked embarrassed. "No, sweetheart, she doesn't have time for that. This is her job." The pianist didn't answer immediately. She looked at the piano, then at the boy, then at the worried expression on his mother's face. She wasn't sure why, but something about the boy touched her. Maybe it was the way he looked at the piano, not like a toy, but like it was something magical. "It's okay," the pianist said softly. "Just for a moment." His mother blinked. "Are you sure?" "I don't want him to. It's fine," the pianist said kindly. "He looks gentle. I'll watch him." The boy's face brightened with a quiet excitement. He didn't run or jump. Instead, he walked carefully toward the stage stairs, as if he understood the importance of the place he was entering. His small hands brushed the railing as he climbed, and when he reached the top, he stood still, looking at the piano again. The pianist moved aside slightly. "Here," she said, inviting him to sit. She helped him onto the bench, making sure he was comfortable. His feet didn't reach the floor, and the seat felt huge to him, but he didn't seem bothered. "Just a few notes, all right?" she said gently. "Don't press too hard." The boy nodded again, but this time his focus was fixed on the keys. His hands hovered over them, and for a moment, he didn't move at all. He simply stared, as if thinking deeply. In the back of the hall, his mother watched nervously. She knew her son loved the piano, but she didn't want him to cause trouble or seem disrespectful. She silently hoped he would just tap a few keys softly and then step away. The stage crew, who had been adjusting lights and cables earlier, paused to watch. A few smiled, expecting nothing more than random notes played by small hands. The hall was silent again. but it was a different kind of silence this time. It felt like the room was holding its breath. The boy placed one finger gently on a single key. A soft note echoed. He paused, then pressed another, and another. He tested the sounds as if he was checking if the piano would respond to him. From the side, the pianist watched closely. There was something unusual in the way he touched the keys, delicate, careful, almost thoughtful. Most children slapped keys with excitement or nervousness, but he seemed to understand that even one note mattered. He slowly placed both hands on the keyboard. His shoulders lifted slightly as he breathed in, and then he played. The first few notes were simple, but they weren't random. They connected smoothly, forming a small melody. The pianist felt her eyebrows lift. She leaned a little closer, trying to understand whether he had memorized something or was simply experimenting. But then the melody grew more confident. His fingers moved with a natural flow, not fast, but precise. The notes formed a tune that was surprisingly beautiful, gentle yet full of feeling. The stage crew stopped what they were doing. One of them whispered, "Is he actually playing that?" Another shook his head slowly, unable to look away. The boy didn't seem aware of anyone watching him. His face softened as he played. His head tilted slightly to the side, listening to every note he created. His small body swayed just a little, as if he was following an invisible rhythm. The pianist felt something warm in her chest. She had seen many young students try to play, but none of them played like this, so naturally, so quietly confident, and with a kind of emotional depth that couldn't be taught easily. For a moment, she wondered where he had learned. Did someone teach him? Did he have a piano at home? Did he listen to music often? Nothing about his simple clothes or the shy way he behaved made her think he came from a musical family. But talent didn't always choose people based on where they came from. The melody continued, flowing like a small stream. There was a purity in his playing, something honest. He didn't try to impress anyone. He was simply enjoying the piano. His mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears forming without her noticing. She had always known he loved the sound of the piano, but she had never heard him on an instrument like this before. His old keyboard at home barely worked. She had thought his playing there was just childlike noise mixed with curiosity. But this was completely different. After a minute, the boy played a soft ending note. It faded slowly, melting into the air, and then he lowered his hands, letting them rest quietly on his lap. The hall stayed silent for a second, almost as if the room didn't want the moment to end. Then the pianist let out a slow breath. She smiled softly at him, her voice warm. "You play beautifully." The boy looked up at her, a little shy again, but there was a tiny spark of pride in his eyes. His mother hurried forward, still emotional. "I'm so sorry," she said gently, though her voice shook. I didn't know he could do that." The pianist looked from the boy to his mother. "He didn't disturb me," she said. "Not at all." She glanced back at the piano, then at the boy, who was still sitting quietly on the bench, his feet swinging above the floor. Something told her this small moment was not just an interruption to her rehearsal. It was the beginning of something much more meaningful. The boy slowly slid off the piano bench, his small hands still warm from the keys. For a moment, he stood there quietly, almost unsure of what to do now that he had finished playing. The pianist watched him with a soft expression, trying to understand how such a young child could play with such gentle skill. She had met many talented children in her life, but there was something different about him, something calm and natural. His mother came up onto the stage and gently touched his shoulder, still looking amazed and a little overwhelmed. "You did very well," she whispered to him, though her voice wavered with emotion. She hadn't expected any of this when she came into work that morning. She had simply hoped to finish her tasks quickly and head home. But now, everything felt different. The pianist sat back down on the bench, thinking for a moment before speaking. "Would you like to sit here again?" she asked the boy. He looked up at her with wide eyes and nodded, but this time he didn't move forward. He stayed beside his mother, waiting for permission. His mother let out a soft breath. "Only if she really doesn't mind," she said. She didn't want to push their luck. "I don't mind," the pianist replied with a warm smile. "He's very gentle with the keys." She shifted to the side again, leaving enough space for the boy. The boy climbed back onto the bench, carefully settling into the same place as before. He sat straighter this time, as if he had gained a little confidence. The pianist watched him, noticing the way his fingers hovered over the keys even when he wasn't playing. He treated the instrument with a kind of respect that reminded her of musicians much older than him. "Do you practice a lot?" she asked softly. The boy nodded, though he didn't say anything else. His mother answered for him. "He has an old keyboard at home," she said. "It was given to us by a neighbor. Some of the keys don't work, but he plays on it all the time. I never really knew what he was trying to play. It didn't sound like much on that broken thing." The pianist listened closely, imagining the boy sitting in his home with a keyboard that barely worked. She wondered how he had learned to play such a smooth melody with an instrument like that. "What kind of music do you listen to?" she asked him. He shrugged lightly. "Videos," he said. "On the phone. Sometimes I listen at night when it's quiet." His mother nodded. "He watches videos of people playing piano. He tries to copy them. I always thought he was just pretending." The pianist smiled gently, turning her attention back to the boy. "Would you like to try something together?" The boy blinked, unsure what she meant. She lifted her hands and placed them lightly on the keys. "I'll play something simple, and you can play with me if you want." The boy looked at her hands, then at his own. For a few seconds, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he placed his fingers on a few notes near the middle of the keyboard. The pianist played the first few notes of a quiet, simple tune. The boy listened closely, tilting his head in that same thoughtful way he had before. When she reached the next part, he answered with a few soft notes of his own. They didn't match perfectly, but they blended together in a pleasant way. The stage crew watched from below, some leaning on equipment, others folding their arms as they listened. Usually, rehearsals were boring for them, just long hours of adjusting lights and waiting for instructions. But today was different. The hall felt warm, almost peaceful. The boy continued to play alongside the pianist. At one point, she switched to a slightly more complicated pattern, curious to see if he would follow. To her surprise, he adjusted his own notes, trying to keep up. He didn't play every note correctly, but he caught the rhythm with remarkable accuracy. "You're very quick," she said softly. The boy didn't say anything, but he gave a tiny smile, just enough to show he was happy. After a few minutes, she stopped playing and let him finish the last few notes by himself. When he lifted his hands again, the hall filled with that same gentle silence from earlier. "You have a good ear," she said. "You can hear the music very well." His mother clasped her hands together, unable to hide her pride. "I always knew he loved music," she said, "but I didn't know he was good at it. I thought maybe it was just a hobby." "It's more than a hobby," the pianist said quietly. "He has a natural skill and a good sense of feeling." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Not everyone has that." The mother lowered her head slightly. "I wish I could help him learn more," she said. "But lessons are expensive, and we don't have a real piano. The keyboard we have is old and almost broken. Even buying batteries for it sometimes becomes a problem." The pianist listened with growing sympathy. She had met many families who struggled to support their children's interests. Music was beautiful, but it wasn't always easy to access. Good instruments were costly, lessons were costly, and opportunities often depended on luck. The boy slid off the bench again and walked toward the edge of the stage. He looked out at the empty seats, rows and rows of them rising into the shadows. The hall must have felt enormous to him, like a whole world he had never stepped into before. He turned back to the pianist. "Do people sit here and listen to you?" he asked. "Yes," she said with a gentle smile. "When there are concerts, the hall is full of people." He stared at the seats again, trying to imagine them filled with faces. "Do they clap?" he asked. "They do," she said. "If the music touches them." The boy looked thoughtful. "I want to make music that people want to listen to." His mother's eyes softened, and she wiped the corner of her eye quietly. The pianist felt something inside her shift. She had worked her whole life to reach the level she was at now, practicing for countless hours, playing in front of thousands, traveling from city to city. But moments like this, seeing a child find joy in music, felt just as special. She stood up and walked toward the boy. "Would you like to hear something?" she asked. He nodded quickly, stepping back to give her room. The pianist returned to the bench and placed her hands gently on the keys. She began to play a soft, warm melody. It wasn't loud or complicated. It was the kind of piece that carried feeling more than technique. The notes drifted through the hall, filling the space with a peaceful, glowing sound. The boy stood close, watching her hands with deep focus. His eyes followed every movement, as if trying to memorize the way her fingers traveled across the keys. His mother listened from the side of the stage, arms wrapped loosely around herself. She had heard music before, but she had never heard it like this up close, where every note felt personal. When the pianist reached the middle of the piece, she glanced at the boy and nodded slightly, inviting him to join her. He stepped forward and gently pressed a few keys that fit the melody. Slowly, he played more, and the music blended again. The sound of their notes together filled the hall like a quiet conversation, soft, honest, and full of promise. When the piece ended, the boy stepped back, looking almost thoughtful. "It feels nice," he said softly. "What does?" the pianist asked. "Playing here," he said. "The sound feels different," she nodded. "This piano is very special, and this hall is built in a way that makes the music travel beautifully." He looked at the piano again. "I want to play like that someday." The pianist smiled gently, feeling a sense of warmth spreading through her chest. "You will," she said softly. "You already have the heart for it." His mother took his hand, ready to leave so the pianist could return to her rehearsal. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You were very kind to him." The pianist shook her head. "He's the one who brought the music today." As they walked toward the exit, the boy glanced back at the piano one last time. There was no fear in his eyes, only hope, curiosity, and a quiet dream beginning to form. He didn't know it yet, but this small moment was the start of something much bigger. And the pianist, watching him leave, already sensed that their paths would cross again in ways none of them expected. The next morning, the concert hall felt different, as if it remembered the quiet magic that had happened the day before. The air held a faint sense of expectation, though no one could explain why. The pianist walked inside carrying her sheet music, her mind already focused on the upcoming performance. She had many things to rehearse, many details to prepare, but even with all the tasks waiting for her, the memory of the small boy playing the piano lingered like a soft echo. She wondered if he would come again. She doubted it. His mother had work only on certain days, and the boy had seemed shy. Still, something inside her hoped she would see him again, not to test his skill, but simply to witness that natural spark once more. The stage crew was already busy adjusting lights and setting up equipment. They greeted her with quick nods as she walked past them, but she noticed a few of them sharing glances, as if the story of yesterday had already become a quiet topic among them. "Morning," she said. "Morning," one of them replied. After a moment, he added with a small smile, "Any chance your little guest is coming back?" She laughed softly. "I don't think so. Yesterday was just a lucky moment." "Lucky for us," another crew member said. "He played better than half the performers we've heard." She shook her head with a smile, though she knew they weren't exaggerating. The boy's touch, his sense of rhythm, his emotional timing, it still amazed her. She walked to the piano, ran her fingers lightly over the smooth surface, and took a deep breath. It was time to begin practice. She opened the lid, sat down, and prepared to play the first piece for the day. But just as she lifted her hands, she heard the soft click of the main door. She glanced toward the entrance. There he was. The small boy walked carefully inside, holding his mother's hand. He wasn't wearing anything fancy, just simple clothes, the same as yesterday. His mother looked hesitant, as if she wasn't sure they should even be there. The pianist stood up immediately. "Good morning," she said warmly. The boy gave a tiny wave. His mother smiled politely and said, "I'm sorry if this is not a good time. I told him I had no work today, but he kept asking if he could come to see the piano again. I didn't want to bother you." "You're not bothering me," the pianist said quickly. "You're both very welcome." Relief washed over the mother's face, and the boy's shoulders softened. He looked at the piano again with that same quiet excitement. "Would you like to listen, or play a little?" the pianist asked. The boy hesitated. "Can I just watch first?" "Of course." She motioned to the front row of seats. "You can sit here." The boy walked over and sat down carefully, his feet dangling above the floor. His mother sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. The pianist returned to the bench. She started to play one of her concert pieces, something strong and expressive, meant to fill the hall with emotion. The notes stretched wide and rich, rising and falling like waves. The boy listened intently, his head tilted the same way it had been the day before. He didn't move, didn't fidget, didn't get bored. He watched her hands, watching the way they traveled across the keys. When she reached a softer section of the piece, she glanced at him. His eyes were shiny with focus, as if he were learning just by watching. When the piece ended, the hall fell into a gentle silence. The boy whispered, "How do your hands move so fast?" The pianist smiled. "Practice. A lot of practice. But you already have a good start." He looked down at his own small hands, turning them over slowly. "My fingers are little," he said. "They'll grow," she replied warmly. "And even now, little hands can make beautiful music." He looked thoughtful. as if he believed her but didn't fully understand. After a few more minutes, the boy stood up and walked toward the stage without even realizing he was doing it. When he reached the stairs, he stopped and looked at his mother for permission. His mother gave a small nod. He climbed the steps one by one and walked to the piano, stopping a short distance away as if he were approaching something sacred. "Would you like to try?" the pianist asked. He nodded slowly. She moved aside once again, giving him space on the bench. He climbed up, sitting in the same spot as before. But this time, the hall wasn't silent. The stage crew paused their work again. Even the cleaner who had just walked in froze and stood quietly in the back. Sensing something important, the boy placed his hands on the keys. He didn't begin immediately. He pressed one note, just to hear the sound, then pressed another. He seemed to be finding his center, preparing himself, and then it happened. He began playing with stronger confidence than the day before. His fingers moved in a flowing pattern, not rushed, not shaky, but steady. He played a melody that wasn't from the videos he watched online. It wasn't something he had practiced on his broken keyboard. It was something new, something he was creating in the moment. The pianist watched with wide eyes. His sense of timing was natural, like he felt the pulse of the music inside him. His hands moved in a way that suggested he wasn't just copying anymore, he was expressing something. The melody shifted, rising gently, then falling like a soft sigh. There was something pure about it, something honest and emotional. The hall held every note as if it were a precious gift. The stage crew stared, mouths slightly open. One of them finally whispered, "This kid is something else." His mother covered her heart with her hand again, feeling it beat faster. She had always known her son was different, quiet, thoughtful, drawn to sounds, but she had never seen him play like this before. Yesterday had been beautiful, but today was something deeper. The boy closed his eyes as he played, letting his fingers guide him. His shoulders relaxed. His breathing matched the rhythm of the melody. He was lost in the sound. When he reached the end of the small piece he had created, he let the final note ring out until it faded into the still air. Then he slowly lifted his hands off the keys. No one moved for several seconds. Finally, the pianist broke the silence with a soft clap. The stage crew followed. His mother wiped her eyes again. The boy looked up, surprised by the applause. He hadn't expected it. "That was beautiful," the pianist said, walking closer. "You played with feeling. Not many people can do that." The boy lowered his gaze shyly. "I just wanted it to sound nice." "It did," she assured him. "Very nice." She sat beside him on the bench. "Do you know what you just did?" He shook his head. "You made your own music," she said gently. "You didn't copy anything. You created something new. That's very special." He blinked in surprise. "I did. Yes, and that's something not everyone can do, not even adults who train for years." A soft smile appeared on his face, small but sincere. His mother stepped closer, unsure if she should interrupt. "He always hums melodies at home," she said. "Sometimes he taps rhythms on the table, but I thought he was just keeping himself busy." The pianist stood up and looked at the mother seriously. "He has a gift, and gifts like this need support." The mother lowered her gaze. "I want to help him," she said quietly, "but we don't have much. I don't even know where to start." The pianist took a deep breath. She knew she couldn't solve everything, but she also knew she couldn't ignore the boy's potential. "Let me teach him," she said. "If you're comfortable with it, I can give him lessons, no cost. I'll do it because he deserves a chance." The mother stared at her, speechless. "Are you serious?" "Very serious," the pianist said with a calm but firm tone. "I've rarely seen talent like his. It would be wrong to leave it unstretched." The boy looked between them, confused but hopeful. "Does that mean I can learn more?" "Yes," the pianist said, smiling at him. "As much as you want." His face lit up, not wildly, but with a deep, glowing happiness. The mother wiped her eyes again, overwhelmed. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to," the pianist said. "Just let him come. That's enough." The boy climbed off the bench and stood beside his mother. He looked up at the pianist with gratitude that didn't need words. The pianist felt her heart warm. She had played for many people in her life, big audiences, famous events, important stages. But somehow, helping this small boy felt just as meaningful. As they prepared to leave, the boy turned back to the piano. "I'll come again," he said softly. "I'll be waiting." The pianist replied, and with that, he took his mother's hand, and together they slowly walked toward the exit. Their footsteps echoed gently in the wide hall. The pianist stood by the piano, watching them until they disappeared through the door. She knew in her heart that this was only the beginning. The boy's journey had just started, and she was ready to help him every step of the way. The hall grew quiet again, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt full of hope, full of possibility, full of a future that neither of them had expected. And somewhere in that quiet space, the faint memory of the boy's gentle melody lingered, promising that something extraordinary was on its way. The afternoon sunlight fell gently across the hall, giving the room a warm and peaceful glow. The crowd had grown larger than anyone expected. Some had stepped in only out of curiosity, while others had heard whispers about a little boy who played with a kind of feeling even adults rarely showed. People leaned against walls, sat on steps, and stood shoulder to shoulder. Yet the room stayed surprisingly quiet, as if everyone sensed that something meaningful was about to happen. The pianist stood near the instrument, watching the boy with new eyes. Moments earlier, he had been unsure what to make of him, just a quiet child with a polite voice who wanted a chance to play. But now things felt different. The boy had already amazed him once, and the pianist couldn't ignore the way the crowd reacted. It wasn't simply that he played fast or loudly. It was the emotion he brought out, honest, raw, and something that reached people without needing words. The boy sat back down at the piano. He adjusted the bench slightly, not in a proud or showy way, but with the calm focus of someone who knew exactly how the instrument should feel beneath him. His feet barely reached the pedals, yet he handled them with surprising care. For a moment, he stayed still. He rested his hands on his lap, looking at the keys as if speaking to them silently. The crowd began to settle, shifting into comfortable positions. People held their breaths without even realizing it. Even children who had been whispering before now sat quietly, sensing the importance of the moment. When the boy finally lifted his hands, his fingers hovered over the keyboard with a gentle steadiness. Then he began to play. The melody he chose this time was softer, slower, and full of emotion. It had a gentle rhythm that reminded people of memories, things they had felt once, but hadn't thought about in a long time. The notes carried a warmth that spread through the room like a quiet embrace. Some people closed their eyes. Others watched his small hands move with an elegance that shouldn't have been possible for someone his age. The pianist, standing close by, felt a strange ache in his chest. Not sadness, something deeper. He had spent years training, practicing long hours, traveling from one performance to another. Music was his life, yet somehow, this little boy had shown him something he had forgotten: the purity of playing, simply because the heart needed to express itself. As the melody continued, the boy's body moved gently with the music. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't playing to prove anything. His focus was soft yet full, as if he had become part of the instrument. Every note he touched seemed to carry a breath of sincerity. Someone near the back whispered, "How can a child play like that?" The person beside them replied softly, "It's like he's telling a story." Another listener, an older woman with silver hair, wiped a quiet tear from her eye. She didn't even understand why she felt emotional. The music wasn't loud or dramatic, but it held something familiar, something deeply human. As the boy moved into the next part of the piece, the pianist noticed the subtle details in his technique, details that professionals spent years trying to master. The boy's touch was intuitive. He knew exactly how much pressure to use, when to soften a note, when to give it strength. These were things that couldn't be taught easily. They came from somewhere within. The pianist found himself holding the edge of the piano, almost to steady his breath. He could see how the crowd responded, how everyone leaned in closer as if the music was pulling them forward. The boy played on, unaware of how deeply he was affecting the people around him. In his mind, he wasn't performing, he was remembering. The melody reminded him of moments at home, of quiet evenings, of the old keyboard he practiced on, and of someone he missed. It wasn't something he spoke out loud, but it lived in his music. Halfway through the piece, the pianist stepped back slightly, giving the boy space. He didn't want to interrupt even with his presence. He felt humbled, almost honored to be witnessing something so natural and pure. The room stayed silent except for the soft sound of the keys. Each note seemed to land carefully in the hearts of the listeners. People who had never met each other suddenly felt connected through the shared moment. As the melody grew a little stronger, the boy's expression changed. He wasn't smiling, but there was a quiet determination in his face. It was as if he wanted to say something through the music, something kind, something hopeful. A young mother holding her toddler whispered, "Listen, he's making the piano sound like it's breathing." Her child nodded without fully understanding, but even they could feel something special. Toward the end of the performance, the air in the hall felt heavy but comforting. like a warm blanket wrapped around everyone. The boy's hands slowed, the notes becoming softer and lighter. When the final tone faded into silence, the room stayed still. Not a single person moved. The sound lingered in the air, echoing in their minds, as if disappearing too quickly would break the quiet magic that had filled the space. The boy withdrew his hands slowly. He placed them gently on his lap and looked down, unsure of what the crowd would think. He expected nothing. He had only wanted to share something he felt. But then it happened. A single clap rang out from the back, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire room burst into applause. It wasn't loud or overwhelming at first, it was warm. It was full of appreciation. The boy lifted his head, surprised. His eyes widened, not out of pride, but out of disbelief. He looked around, unsure what to do. The pianist stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, giving him reassurance. The applause grew stronger. People stood up, cheering softly, smiling brightly. Some waved at the boy, others simply held their hands to their chest, touched by what they had just experienced. The child gave a small, shy smile. It wasn't big or showy. It was the kind of smile that came from being seen for the first time. The pianist leaned down and whispered something only the boy could hear. "You have a gift, a real one." The boy didn't know what to say, but he nodded gently. As the applause continued, the pianist looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the audience. He could tell they had felt it to the moment, the emotion, the beauty. This wasn't just a performance. It was a reminder of how powerful simple, honest music could be. When the applause finally began to settle, the pianist stepped forward and addressed the crowd softly. "Thank you for giving this young musician your attention and your hearts," he said. People nodded, some wiping away tears, others smiling quietly. The boy stood beside him, unsure where to look. He wasn't used to being in front of so many people, but he felt safe, comforted by the pianist's presence. As the room slowly returned to its usual sounds, people whispering, shoes moving across the floor, children adjusting in their seats, the pianist looked down at the boy with a gentle but curious expression. He wanted to know more. Where did this talent come from? Who had taught him? What kind of life had shaped this kind of emotion in someone so young? But he didn't ask yet. Instead, he said softly, "Would you like to play something else?" "Only if you want to." The boy hesitated. He looked at the crowd, then back at the pianist. For the first time since he arrived, he asked quietly, "Can I play something that I made myself?" The pianist's eyes widened slightly. "You wrote your own music?" The boy nodded. The pianist stepped back, giving him full space. "Then this stage is yours. Share it with us." The crowd fell silent again as the boy placed his hands on the keys. No one knew what they were about to hear, but everyone could feel something building, as if the real story was just beginning. The room had fallen into a deep silence once again, the kind that only appeared when something meaningful was about to happen. The boy sat at the piano, his small hands resting lightly on the keys. He took a slow breath, and the pianist standing nearby watched him with gentle curiosity. No one in the room knew what kind of melody he was about to play, but everyone could feel a soft anticipation building inside them. The boy finally began touching the keys. His first notes were quiet, barely louder than a whisper. They floated into the air like soft footsteps. The audience leaned in, wanting to hear every sound clearly. It wasn't like the other pieces he had played earlier. This one felt personal from the very beginning. Each note held a feeling, as if he was sharing a memory kept deep inside him. As the melody grew, the pianist realized this was different. It didn't sound like a piece written by someone copying others, or practicing something taught from a book. It carried emotion that seemed too deep for his age. The tones rose and fell gently, like someone telling a story without using words. It had sadness, comfort, hope, and something indescribable, something that made the heart tighten. The boy's expression stayed calm, but his eyes softened with each passing moment. His tiny shoulders moved with the rhythm, and his hands glided across the keys softly, like they were made for this and nothing else. There was something honest in the way he played. He wasn't trying to show off. He wasn't trying to impress the crowd. He was simply sharing a piece of his heart. People in the audience felt it immediately. A few wiped their eyes. Others held their breath so the sound wouldn't be interrupted. The melody had a warmth that wrapped around the listeners, reminding them of things they hadn't thought about in years, a childhood memory, a quiet night, a moment when they had felt understood. The pianist was deeply moved. He had performed in many places, heard countless musicians, judged competitions, and trained students. But there was something different about this. It wasn't perfect in a technical sense. There were moments where the boy's fingers hesitated, or when his small hands struggled to reach certain notes, but none of that mattered. What came through the music was real emotion, pure and untouched. As the boy continued playing, the story inside the melody became clearer. It began with a soft sadness, slowly rising into a gentle glow, like someone finding hope after a difficult time. The music grew brighter, filled with warmth and longing. Then it softened again, as if remembering something precious. The audience felt carried through these emotions, as if they were walking through memories of their own. They didn't know what the boy had been through, but they felt it in the music that he had felt: love, loss, hope, and courage in his young life. Near the middle of the piece, the boy closed his eyes completely, letting his hands lead on their own. The pianist noticed this and felt chills run down his arms. The boy wasn't playing from sight or from trained memory. He was playing from feeling. It was as if the piano understood him, responding gently to each touch. A woman near the front whispered, "This child, he plays like he's lived 1,000 stories." Her words reached the ears of people around her, and they nodded softly. They felt it too. The boy reached the next part of the piece, where the melody suddenly grew stronger, fuller. The notes rang out with determination. It sounded like someone trying to rise after falling, someone refusing to give up. His hands moved more confidently now, his fingers dancing across the keys with surprising ease. The pianist felt his eyes sting. For the first time in a long while, he felt inspired not as a musician, but as a human being. The boy reminded him of why he fell in love with music in the first place, because it spoke truths that people couldn't express in words. As the piece neared its final section, the music shifted into a gentle calm. The loud emotions faded into peaceful ones. The boy slowed down, letting each note sink into the room. He wasn't rushing. He took his time, giving every sound a space to breathe. It felt like he was saying goodbye to the melody he had created, like someone softly closing a chapter they cherished. Finally, the last notes fell lightly into the air. They were soft, almost like a quiet whisper. When they faded away completely, the boy let his hands rest still. He kept his head slightly bowed, not daring to look up. The room didn't move. Everyone sat frozen, unable to break the moment. They wanted to hold on to the last notes, to keep the feeling alive just a little longer. Even the children, who usually fidgeted during performances, stayed perfectly still. After a few long seconds, someone breathed out. Then another. Then a person began clapping softly and slowly, like a wave building strength. The applause grew. Within moments, the audience rose to their feet. It wasn't the kind of applause people gave out of politeness. It was deep, warm, full of gratitude. People clapped with both hands and hearts. Some smiled through tears, others simply nodded as if saying, "Thank you. Thank you for sharing this with us." The boy lifted his head at last. When he saw everyone standing, he froze in shock. His hands tightened nervously as he looked around the room. He had never expected this. He had never imagined so many strangers would be moved by something he created. The pianist stepped beside him, placing a gentle hand on his back. "You did something beautiful," he whispered. The boy gave a small, uncertain smile. He wasn't used to attention or praise, but the genuine warmth from the audience made him feel safe, like he belonged in a place he once only dreamt of. When the applause finally settled, the pianist turned to the crowd and spoke softly. "You witnessed something rare today. A young musician who plays not from technique, but from the heart." People nodded. Many of them knew they had just experienced something they would remember for a long time. The pianist then knelt beside the boy so they were at the same height. "Where did you learn to play like this?" he asked gently. The boy hesitated. Then he answered in a quiet voice, "I learned by listening, and by feeling." "Did someone teach you?" the pianist asked. The boy shook his head. "I only had an old keyboard at home. Some of the keys didn't work, but I tried to make the music inside my head sound real." The pianist felt a strong emotion rise in his chest. A child had created such beauty with nothing but imagination and a broken instrument. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You have a gift, and I want to help you grow it, if you'll let me." The boy blinked in surprise. "Help me?" "Yes," the pianist said with a warm smile. "I want to teach you, truly teach you. You deserve a chance to let the world hear your music." The boy didn't know what to say. He looked at the piano, then at the crowd, then back at the pianist. "Do you think I'm good enough?" he asked, his voice small. The pianist shook his head, not in disagreement, but with gentle sincerity. "You're more than good enough. You're special." Tears gathered in the boy's eyes, not because he was sad, but because someone finally saw him not as a child playing for fun, but as someone with real talent. The crowd, seeing the moment, grew quiet again. Some placed hands over their hearts, touched by the exchange. The pianist continued softly, "If you want, I'll help you learn everything you need to know, and one day, you'll share your music with people far beyond this room." The boy swallowed hard, then nodded. "I would like that," he whispered. The pianist smiled warmly. "Then we begin together." The hall filled with gentle applause once more, not loud, not overwhelming. It was soft, supportive, like a warm embrace. The boy stepped away from the piano, holding tightly to the memory of the moment. He didn't know where his life would go from here. He didn't know what challenges or joys the future held. But for the first time, he felt something new, a quiet hope inside him. And that hope felt like music. As they walked out of the hall together, one small hand holding the side of the pianist's coat, the world outside felt bigger, brighter, full of possibilities. His story wasn't ending. It was just beginning.